Greg Ehrenberg here from the Stochastic, and we've got a big MMA card on Saturday. Going to be over in London. A lot of local fighters on the card, which sure should bring a lot of excitement. The last time we saw a card there, we saw guys like Tom Aspinall, Molly McCann, Paddy Pimblett. They all showed out, so expecting more of the same for Saturday's card. So I'm about to dig into my favorite prize picks props of the entire slate. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and leave a comment below. I want to know what stands out to you on prize picks for this weekend, but without further ado, these are my favorite props for Saturday's card. To start us off, I'm looking at over 63.5 significant strikes for the action man, Chris Curtis, taking on Jack Hermansson on short notice. And if you look at the odds for this fight, it's considered a coin flip. We've got books looking at this as really a 50-50 fight right around pick'em. Seen it go a little bit back and forth. At times, Hermansson's been a slight favorite. At times, Curtis has been a slight favorite. But more or less, very tightly lined fight. I do expect it to be competitive. But on paper, I think this is a pretty decent matchup for Chris Curtis, primarily because the path to victory for Hermansson, it's going to have to come through his wrestling. I don't think he's going to outstrike Chris Curtis in this spot. And from what we've seen out of Curtis, he has excellent takedown defense. So far, 100% takedown defense for Chris Curtis in his UFC career, which that's perfect. Obviously, can't be any higher than 100%. And he just took on a physical freak in Rodolfo Vieira, who's one of the highest level grapplers in all of the UFC. And Curtis was able to stuff all of his takedowns in that spot. And it wasn't one or two takedowns that he was able to fend off. Vieira went 0 for 20 on takedown attempts in that matchup. Now, Vieira's overwhelming physically and doesn't have all the same technique that we see from somebody like Jack Hermansson, but Hermansson is getting a little bit up there in age. And I think this is a spot where Chris Curtis should be able to stuff the takedowns. And if that happens, the fight plays out on the feet, and I would favor Curtis fairly significantly there, not just from an overall better striker standpoint, but also just the output that we see from Chris Curtis on the feet. So Curtis lands 7.23 significant strikes per minute. That's incredibly high output. And if this fight is going to play out on the feet, like I think it will, I don't think Chris Curtis will have too much issues hitting the over there. There is a chance that he knocks out Hermansson, but Hermansson has shown to be fairly durable throughout his UFC career. He's only been stopped a couple of times on the feet, and one of them came against Jared Cannonier, who is massive power for the division. So I think this fight goes to decision. I think it's a fairly high output fight from just a striking perspective, and I have to side with the numbers there for Chris Curtis. So give me the over on his significant strikes to start us off. While I was doing my best to give you guys the best props possible, actually in the few weeks that I've done this, I've hit at least 2 or 3 out of the props in my video in all of them so far. So I haven't had a losing week on this yet, but still, it's not quite the same as free money, which you are going to get at PrizePicks when you sign up using the promo code AWESEMO, because they're going to give you up to a $100 bonus on your first deposit. Why not take advantage of that? It's free money, help build your bankroll. So when you're signing up at PrizePicks for the first time, use that promo code AWESEMO. The next fight I'm looking at, it's another fighter with a pretty significant striking advantage, Nathaniel Wood. I'm siding with him for over 75.5 significant strikes against Charles Rosa. And, you know, Rosa's really gotten the most out of his UFC career based on his athletic ability. But the reality is whenever he's going up against anybody with some form of athleticism, he's at a pretty big disadvantage. And I do think Nathaniel Wood is the far better striker and much better athlete in this matchup. The one thing that is somewhat of a concern for me is that Charles Rosa has non-existent takedown defense. He only defends takedowns at 38%. Some of that is because he's happy to play off his back. And so there is a possible path in this fight where Nathaniel Wood is just able to take Charles Rosa down and hold him there, because that is what we've seen happen in quite a few Charles Rosa fights. But with that said, Rosa is a decent grappler. He is a black belt. And I think that the easiest path to victory for Nathaniel Wood in this spot is just going to be beating up Charles Rosa on the feet. And once again, if you look at the striking numbers here, kind of similar to what I said about Chris Curtis, Nathaniel Wood has a big striking advantage in this matchup, and he puts out a ton of output. Nathaniel Wood lands 6.28 significant strikes per minute compared to 3.05 for Charles Rosa. And Charles Rosa also has a negative striking differential, meaning that he absorbs 3.62 per minute compared to landing that 3.05. So this is somebody who takes more damage than he doles out, and Nathaniel Wood, a very high output striker. Rosa has shown to be pretty durable on the feet, so I don't think him getting knocked out is all that likely. So I'm hoping here that Nathaniel Wood avoids the grappling, just keeps this fight on the feet. And if that happens, I expect well over 100 significant strikes from Nathaniel Wood. So this number does look a little bit low to me. Big striking advantage. Hopefully Wood keeps the fight on the feet. If that happens, I think he cruises to a decision victory and also lands well over his significant strikes mark over on PrizePicks. So another over on significant strikes, and this one is going to be with Nathaniel Wood. For my final pick on the slate, I'm going with Mason Jones for over 58.5 significant strikes. And it's a number I just don't really understand based on the kind of output that we've seen from Mason Jones thus far in his UFC career. So it's only been 3 fights, but also if you look at some of his fights prior to coming to the UFC, he gets into wars. He marches forward. He throws it in incredibly high volume, which we've also seen in the UFC, landing 6.71 significant strikes per minute. So a little bit of a trend, if you guys have noticed with the 3 picks I've given out today. All of these guys are very, very high output strikers, landing somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 7 significant strikes per minute. So the UFC debut for Mason Jones, he lands 117 significant strikes against Mike Davis. It was a decision loss, but still, you saw the kind of output that he puts out. Then he fights against Ilan Patrick, and this fight has to come with an asterisk. Mason Jones just beating the crap out of Patrick, and there ends up being an eye poke. Patrick kind of looks for a way out. So still, though, the fight was called off at the start of the second round, and Mason Jones had 46 significant strikes at that point in the fight. His last fight against David Onama, and Onama has since shown to be a really good UFC prospect and a solid young fighter. Mason Jones landed 87 significant strikes and 8 takedowns. So he was really, really active in that fight. And then you look at the matchup he has against Ludovic Klein, and when it comes to Klein, his striking stats are just not all that great. 3.58 significant strikes landed per minute, so about half the output that we see from Mason Jones. And then also 4.22 significant strikes absorbed per minute. So not a very defensively sound fighter, and Mason Jones is going to march forward. He's going to throw in really high volume. And just based on what we've seen out of Mason Jones, I don't think he should ever have a fight where he's going to have a line of 58.5 significant strikes. Really, the only way that I see him hitting the under here is if there was to be an early finish in this spot. And even if there's a finish in the second round, I still think we'd probably see Mason Jones over that significant strike mark. So I really like this. I think that Mason Jones' volume is really being underrated by PrizePicks in this spot. So over 58.5 significant strikes for Mason Jones to finish us out here. So to recap my bets for Saturday's MMA slate, we've got Chris Curtis over 63.5 significant strikes, Nathaniel Wood over 75.5 significant strikes, and then Mason Jones over 58.5 significant strikes. Those are 3 numbers that I just think are much too low considering the output of those fighters. And kind of all the same logic when it comes to all of those fighters just being really high output strikers that I think should be looking to keep those fights on the feet. So those are the 3 that I like, but also leave a comment below. I want to know what you guys like. Also like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And don't forget, when you sign up at PrizePicks, use the promo code AWESEMO because you get up to a $100 bonus on your first deposit. And there's a couple of different ways we could play the props over at PrizePicks. There's the flex play where you only have to hit 2 out of 3 props correctly, and that is going to pay out 1.25x your entry fee. But still, if you go 3 out of 3, there's an added bonus getting 2.25x your entry fee. But if you're really confident that you have 3 props that you love that are going to hit over at PrizePicks, you want to use the power play, you go 3 out of 3, and that pays out 5x your entry fee. So that does it for me this week. Thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoy the card, and good luck this weekend.